Welcome back to Freed from Feminism. I'm Teresa.
And I'm Beth.
Thanks for joining us again. We are very excited to get into our subject today, which is, what do we mean by feminism?
Yep, that term feminism, it's been tossed around so much nowadays. It has so many different connotations. So we thought it'd probably be wise for a podcast called Freed from Feminism, we define exactly what we mean that we're being freed from.
Exactly. So why don't we just go ahead and dive in, shall we?
Right, let's do it.
How do most people define feminism, do you think? I took the Encyclopedia Britannica's definition as pretty standard. It's the belief in social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. And, you know, I'd say for just a generic version, that's pretty right on point. Do you agree, Beth?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty accurate, especially when you talk about the waves of feminism. And of course, we'll go more into the history, but each wave focuses on that idea of, you know, the social, economic, or political equality of the sexes in some form.
Exactly. And it just gets more radical as the waves increase.
Mm-hmm.
So that definition, though, kind of as we inferred there, it's been captured by the culture at large to mean many different things. And now it's really hard to just say you're a feminist or I'm a feminist and someone to understand what you mean. Many groups have claimed their own brand of feminism. For example, liberal feminism and conservative feminism, radical feminism. There's something called Marxist and socialist feminism. And even something called ecofeminism. And, you know, then you have the racially or sexuality-based brands of feminism, like Black feminism or queer feminists. And now we see even faith-based brands like Christian or Catholic feminists. So today we are discussing how we at Freed from Feminism define feminism so that we have a base to work off from in our future podcasts.
You know, it's so interesting hearing that list of the different types of feminism, because here they are all claiming that they agree with this thing called feminism, but some of their other titles just contradict. You know, you have Marxist and then you have Catholic. So how can you both be feminist? What is it's tying together? But I think similar to what the original definition, all of these sort of tie into the same idea. I think we should say feminism is any ideology or movement that adheres to the idea that men and women are equal. That's what it seems. There's something in there that's saying there's equality in some sort of sense. So each of those different feminisms that you mentioned may not think of equality in the same way, but it seems like they're still fighting for something that they think that are equal. Perhaps that they think men have more of an advantage of now, but that women need to also have that advantage to gain that equality. But it's interesting though, because, you know, what is this equality that everybody wants? Like, when are we truly going to be equal? And what does it really mean to be equal?
Exactly. And do we even want equality when we really understand what it means?
Mm-hmm.
I always go back to an amazing piece by Bishop Fulton Sheen called Communism and Woman. It has so many amazing points in it, and I really encourage everyone listening to go Google that and read it. It's amazing. It's really, really interesting and thought-provoking. I haven't taken obviously the entire article, but I've taken a long quote from it that goes to what we're talking about here with regards to equality and what it means. So I'm going to quote from it. It's a little bit long. Hang in there. It's amazing. So, quote, "Equality is law. It is mathematical, abstract, universal, indifferent to conditions, circumstances, and differences. Equity is love, mercy, understanding, sympathy, the consideration of details, appeals, and departures from the fixed rules of courts, which law has not yet embraced. Applying this distinction to women, we are saying that Equity rather than equality should be the basis of all the claims of women. It goes beyond equality by claiming superiority in certain aspects of life. Equity is the perfection of equality, not a substitute. It has the advantages of recognizing the specific difference between man and woman, which equality does not have. As a matter of fact, they are not equal in sex. They are quite unequal. And it is only because they are unequal that they complement one another. The violin and the bow are not equal. Each has a superiority of function. Man and woman are equal inasmuch as they have the same rights and liberties, the same final goal of life, and both have been redeemed by the blood of our divine Savior. But they are different in function. It is that truth which solves the problem. End quote.
Wow. That was really good.
I love that because it puts in perspective what equality really is. And it seeks sameness. It wants to take our differences and do away with them, which is just completely impossible for human beings to do.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that he chose the word equity. I've sometimes heard complementarity, but this kind of puts a new spin on things, and I like it. Going over like the same idea that equality, and I've heard this before, and I love how Venerable Fulton Sheen had mentioned it, that we are equal in ways, but we're not equal in all ways.
Equal in dignity.
Yes. Yeah, equal in dignity, because Christ came to save everybody, man and woman. And I think it points out here too that there are gonna be differences. So, we have all these different types of feminism, but is it making note of the differences that do exist and then fighting for equality in the right places?
That's a good question. Yeah. So we named a bunch of the different kinds of feminism: liberal feminism, conservative feminism, radical feminism. You can even go much deeper. Those are just kind of like the macro level types of feminism that are out there. But I mean, there's individual groups that claim the term feminist that maybe just kind of a cultural fad at the moment, but it's where we are. And so what do you think about, Beth, how to deal with this from our perspective, from Freed from Feminism's perspective of how do we refute all these different kinds of feminism?
Oh, it's such a difficult question, because when you think about it, you say feminism is bad. One, it's difficult, like we said, because there's a lot of definitions. So not really explaining what it is you don't like about feminism, or what it is about feminism you don't like. So that can be tricky. One of the things I think we need to discuss here is that when you try to refute feminism, it's difficult, because if you're refuting feminism, you're refuting what people's definition of feminism is, and that is this idea that men and women are equal. So if you say, I don't like feminism, they hear, you don't think men and women are equal, and therefore women are below men. So they think that if you're not for feminism, you're not for women. They're going to say, well, then why don't you think women are good enough? When rather, Venerable Fulton Sheen is saying here that equality isn't what we think it means in all of these definitions of feminism. Men and women are equal, but we have to give more. We have to exactly define what we think we mean by equal, because you could say, oh yeah, men and women are equal, but then you could stretch it too far.
Absolutely. And there's another quote out there, I believe by Venerable Sheen, that women have traded superiority for equality.
Because then the question says, like, when are we equal? And then does that put women above?
Right. And what are we striving to be equal with? It seems like a never ending list. It first started with, okay, we just want to vote, or we just don't want to be, in their minds chattel, that I think that's probably just, to be nice, an exaggeration, that women were ever chattel. But anyways,
it goes even so far to stretch that they'll say, oh, we agree with you in the idea that we have equal dignity, but then they'll stretch that dignity to apply to different aspects in their life. So one of the things that we can talk about, and this is very controversial, but people will say, oh, we need more women leadership in the church because we're of equal dignity, so we should be getting the same respect and the same positions as men in the church. Mm-hmm. And so it can get really tricky there too, because it's, is that really, and I'll mention it here because, I'll bring up a controversial topic, but, Christ, he saw the differences between men and women, but he utilized them. He assigned all of his apostles as men, but there were women around, women who followed him, and he kept them there, and he had a very special place for them. They took care of the men during their travels, but it was the apostles who went and evangelized. But then he also used the women at times to then tell the men, hey, Christ is risen, and of course they didn't listen, but so he didn't just take all the men and women and assign them to all be apostles and tell them to go spread the gospel. No, he gave each one their specific role. So you can't say, oh, well, they're the same dignity. It's like, but we have these specific functions that are supposed to be noted in our daily lives.
Absolutely. And let's just go ahead and delve into this topic of Christian and Catholic feminism, because, if we're going to, go by our definition of, or what we mean by feminism, an ideology or movement that adheres to the idea that men and women are equal, that doesn't leave too much room for feminism in Christianity, or specifically Catholic Christianity. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. Jesus not only created, men and women understanding their differences, he created them to have differences. He created them with the purpose of being different, to complement each other, to fit like puzzle pieces together. It was never supposed to be a power struggle. It was never supposed to be a he said, she said sort of situation, which, ended up happening even in the Garden of Eden. You see that after Eve takes that first bite, and Adam, when he's answering to God, he says, the woman made me do it. I think that's probably part of the punishment of them being banished out of the Garden of Eden, is the curse of them no longer living in perfect harmony, with Adam being the leader and Eve being the perfect helpmate.
But I think we should reiterate the point to the listeners that here we say, oh, well, we're complementarity and we're different, and it's so true, but you gotta get it out of your mind, this fight that's coming back probably that says, oh, but then that means women are doormats, or that women are less, or women can't do as much as men, because it's not what we're saying. It's just there's very specific roles that are towards it, and it's very difficult, especially in our culture where we've been told so much that there's the answer for women is feminism, because that's when women will be considered equal, as opposed to saying that women are considered much less than men. But what we're saying here is that there's another way to help women. So that passion that we each have to lift other women up, to see women succeed, feminism doesn't have to be the answer. We want to say men and women are complementarity, and what are the traits of a woman that can be nurtured and grow, and how in society can she contribute in that way, rather than saying men and women are equal, so men do this, so women do this. Because that's sort of how feminism has taken it. Instead of looking at the traits that women have and saying, oh, these are good things, we should try to embrace these. Instead, they'll say, oh, well, men vote, women should vote. Or, men get to have sex in this way, so why can't women? And so on. And men have careers, so women can too. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for clarifying that, Beth. That is absolutely what we're saying. And the fact is, a true Christian perspective on femininity is one of profound dignity and awe and wonder and just beauty. I didn't even know this, actually, to be honest, Beth, before I got married. Mm-hmm. When I got married to my husband, he even when we were obviously when we were dating and in our engagement, he kept trying to convince me that women were better than men. We were higher in nature than men. And it just, what? That doesn't make any sense. He didn't make one sex better than the other.
Mm-hmm.
But what he meant was Eve was a foreshadowing of the Blessed Mother. Eve was the highest point of creation, as he calls it.
Mm-hmm.
Eve was the climax of the jaw-dropping beauty of creation that had just happened in those 7 days. And even though she fell and Adam fell, it never lessened the fact that she was the apex of all created life. And she was taken in because she was a type of Mary. Mary is even more so that in the fact that she's the mother of God, and she was completely sinless. And that's why Catholics embrace her so much as their mother, is because she embodied the perfect femininity. She embodied the perfection of womanhood in every sense. And so that's, I won't speak for you, Beth, but that for me, that's what I mean by let's reject equality and just try to be the apex of all womanhood, which God, by his own hand, made in certain ways superior. That has huge responsibilities. I'm not saying, of course, this is not another brand of feminism I'm talking about. This is a deeply self-sacrificial thing to do. This is a deeply difficult in certain ways, because you, just like a man, have to die to yourself every day, your selfish wants and your desire for power, because a lot of these forms of feminism, it's gone beyond equality to just desiring pure power and control. While a true femininity, a true godly femininity rejects that completely, and you try to emulate all the wonderful characteristics of a Mary-like femininity: humility, chastity, like I said, self-sacrificial piety, and gentleness, kindness, name your adjective.
Yes. And it's so beautiful how women were created and what we can offer and bring. And the easy go-to reference is just how we can give birth, a miraculous thing that is, that children can just grow inside of us, without us really doing anything, So, and that's the thing, is so we have all this beauty and these talents, but there's specific places that they're right in. So, if you recognize that, if a listener says, "Oh, I understand that. Well, that's why we need women to do this, and that men do." It says, no, it's are those things that you want the women to do really the best place for the women to have their, effect on society? Actually, going back to the first wave of feminism, one of the things that I've done in times that I've researched is I actually found that this was shocking to me, because to me, a lot of people say, "Oh, first wave, women should vote." Said and done. We don't need to have any more discussion. Like, we agree with that. But it was so interesting, actually, looking at the side of these anti-suffragists and what they had to say, because none of them were really against women. Now, I'm not here to have a political debate about women voting or anything, certainly not. But it was just interesting to see that there were people at that time, even women, who said, "Okay, sure, but we don't think that's where women need to be right now." They didn't think that was the place for women at the time. They thought women would be better someplace else. And actually, there was a cardinal at the time. His name was Cardinal James Gibbons. And there's this quote that I really like by him that says, "Woman is queen indeed, but her empire is the domestic kingdom." So here he's giving a compliment to women, but he was arguing at the time that he didn't feel that women belonged in the political sphere. They belonged in the domestic kingdom at home, and affecting our society by raising up the young, who will then go into society.
I like that term. I think we should go by Empress.
Yeah. Yes, we're queens, empires of our own kingdoms. So, I mean, just an interesting idea, because this just baffled my mind that, there was people who thought, okay, yes, we see the same thing you're seeing in women, but we want to apply it in this way. So, I mean, that just goes to show there are multiple ways to apply the beauty and traits of a woman to society. But what is the best answer? Then, and that's what we're here to find out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, kind of like we mentioned, this idea has started to really infect the church in the last few decades. And it's manifested itself in several ways. There's always the movement to get the church to, allow for women priests or women deacons. And even, to be honest, there have been some church documents, some papal encyclicals, in fact, that have not expressly endorsed feminism, but it could definitely be interpreted
construed in that way. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And they use, kind of, it's supposed to be empowering and encouraging and reverential, but it really ends up just helping the feminist cause when you use terms like feminine genius, or when you don't attack the ideology at its source. In my opinion, it's been a little bit too murky for our own good lately, just because it has not attacked, that the church hasn't attacked feminism at its root. It's taken on this Christian feminism, mantle, and tried to kind of take back the term, which it never really was our term. So I'm not sure how that works, but I've actually been told that by a church official. We're going to take back the Christian feminism term. And, in my opinion, they're two diametrically opposed ideologies. One, like we were talking about, it's one extols equity and the reign of the empress at home, and someone who is superior in nature by God himself, created by God himself, and then one that just allows for the culture to kind of infiltrate our thinking and just debase both sexes by doing that. Because then, by then, creating an equal atmosphere, you also are debasing the man's role by trying to force fit it with feminine characteristics, because that's what happens when equality is part of the situation.
No, I agree. And people keep using that word. It's kind of like that scene from The Princess Bride where he's like, I don't think you really know what that word means, or something like that.
I love that movie.
People keep using it. They keep saying feminism and thinking it's this great thing. But it's, what is each person means something entirely different, because they're thinking of equality in a different way. So like you said, yeah, that foundation is broken. We got to stop using it. We have to do something else to advocate for women, because the definition, the foundation that their feminism is built on is not good. Not to mention the horrible roots of feminism that we'll go into later, because, this word feminism, right, I don't think popped up until after some of the first wave. So we've just kept using it since then, and we think, if we want to help women, we'll use feminism. But the issue is, its original definition isn't good, and then what are we trying to help women with, and are we really following what we should through Christ's teachings and applying that to our lives?
Yeah, we will be going in depth into the history of feminism in those aspects in subsequent episodes. So.
I would still just tell our listeners to, even if they disagree with anything we've said so far, to keep listening as we dive further in, since it's such a broad topic. As we said, there's so many definitions. It's hard to capture all of this in one episode. So we will go into detail with that history, more about equality, more about practical means, because I'm a practical person, and I may have listened to this and said, that's great, but what exactly am I supposed to do every day? And so on.
Exactly. The point of this podcast is twofold. One, to expose the dangers of feminism, and also to support women like us, like both Beth and I, who have, seen through feminism and come to that moment where you're like, okay, what do I do? Kind of like Beth said, what next? How do I live my life? How do I go forward in this world knowing what I know now? And so we definitely want to be practical in our suggestions, and hopefully we can also give you some resources later on to help you in your everyday practical life to become more feminine and to become closer to God and your family and find your big V vocation in life, even.
Exactly. We're here to help. We're just not using feminism because we've used that word too much. So we're trying something else.
Amen. Well, if that's all, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you again for listening to another episode of Freed from Feminism. Please share this podcast and subscribe to it in iTunes or wherever else you're listening to us. Also, check us out on Twitter now. Our handle is at Freed Feminism. At Freed Feminism. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing, and God be with you all.